All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. So I know the tradition is to start with public hearing items. Sujata's here? Hi, Sujata. So this is item 25, adopt executive officers 2018-19 proposed budget. Many of you know that we're at the retreat. Immediately prior to, there was a request when we talked about the budget. It was a deficit budget originally to go to a balanced budget. Sujata, you want to talk briefly about what we did to get it to a balanced budget?
Sure, Wayne. Thanks. So the board asked us to balance the budget. The budget originally was showing revenues of 162.6 million and expenditures of 166.2 million. So there's a different deficit of $3.6 million, and that was balanced by increasing our assumed vacancy rate that we put in the budget is 8%. So we increased the vacancy rate by 1%, and that is going to give us a salary saving of $1.4 million. We also reduced some of the capital expenditures by $1.1 million and some services and supplies by $1.1 million. So that got us to the $3.6 million. And we balanced it. However, the board did recommend that we could go back mid-year and do another assessment of our revenues and expenditures at that time and see if, we could come back and ask for additional appropriations to, get those expenditures that are very necessary for the district. They are kind of IM and infrastructure types.
I just want to note that with regards to the vacancy rate from the 8 to 9%, Jill, maybe you could sort of speak to how fast we've been able to hire and sort of how we think that'll impact us during the year.
Okay. We are doing really well filling vacancies. As you recall, last January we added 47 positions, so that inflated our vacancy rate by several different percent. So right now we're around 12-13% vacancy. And so it's unlikely that we'll be able to, even with our best efforts, with all the retirements and other things, to get to the 8% in that fiscal year. So that really won't have any material impact on us. And if we do get additional revenue, we can always adjust if necessary. So despite our HR folks working extremely hard and doing a great job with recruitments, we're just inching along slowly to reducing that vacancy rate, so that should not have an impact. And we only did that for the first year. That's just for the next fiscal year, so one time it should not have any impact on us.
Yeah, so our goal is to have the 8%. We have a big challenge right now. All the other air districts are hiring. Nobody can hire as fast as we would like to, but we're doing our best, and we think that we can continue to make progress on all the issues that we're addressing. So the other thing that I wanted to point out, with the balanced budget, we get increased scrutiny from the legislature. At least at a deficit, we got an argument when we're making before the legislators about why we need funding. Department of Finance and the governor's office has been very aggressive with us, saying we have plenty of money, we shouldn't have to give you guys any additional funds. And most of the funds that we have are earmarked for special purpose funds. So we really don't, but when we're showing that kind of reserve, it just makes extra work for us. But we certainly understand the optics, if you will, of the balanced budget. So this was an effort to provide that, let people know that we have sound fiscal management as well as sound operational and program management. So unless there's any additional questions, then I would suggest that we go back to the beginning. Joe, you want to take it from here?
Sure. So starting on page,
I'm sorry, I just want a quick question. With the sort of revision to this fiscal year, did that make any changes in the outgoing years? Because at the retreat, they seem to be pretty concerned about the out years versus so much the so did that make any wrinkle, any sort of changes through that?
On balance did change,
Okay.
of course, by cutting costs and balancing this year's budget. It increased every year by 2%.
Okay, thank you.
good question. Okay, so on page 2 for the set hearings, the set hearing for July will be on the potential changes to the labeling requirements for Rule 1111. There was some interesting discussion on that at the Stationary Source Committee, and the Stationary Source Committee is going to recommend that we don't add labeling requirements or change labeling requirements on the units themselves. So we'll be talking to the full board about that. But that is the only set hearing for that month. So, Tracy, did you want to say anything? Did you need to say anything about Rule 1111?
No, I don't think so, Susan.
No? Okay. Do you have any questions?
Just one, what's the status of getting the contractor all ready to start the program? That, I know staff was gonna try and expedite that.
Just real briefly, the contract's been executed with EGIA. We're working with them to develop not only our own website, but links to their website for people to be able to do an online application for the rebate program. We expect, working with them, that we'll be able to kick off the rebate program in mid-June.
Okay,
And we're gonna do a press release. The contractor, which is very well connected with a lot of the manufacturers, distributors, and contractors, has already been down here locally, meeting with them. And they'll be working with contractors that have the compliant products, which we have 3 different manufacturers.
so the original time frame was 30 days after the contract was executed,
It's 30 business days,
30 business
so
days.
essentially 6 weeks. So that's why we're looking at mid-June.
Isn't business days at this place 7 days a week, 8 days a week?
I think for us it is, but for them it's not.
Got it, thank you.
But anyway, mid-June kickoff, and we'll be doing press release. We're working with Sam's office to do all that, so.
Okay, great, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tracy.
Okay, so on page 3, there are two items there. Susan, do you have anything that you'd like to add about the, first one is a contract for enhancing our socioeconomic assessments for the air quality management plan.
Actually, I'm not too familiar with this one, but I think it's just to update the app, part of the app recommendations for the socioeconomic and to execute the contract.
Questions? Okay, so the next one is out of our STA shop. Fred, do you have comments on that one?
This item is for a hydrogen fueling station at the Toyota facility at the port. We do have a grant from CEC, and they are also for $8 million. They are also providing $1.4 million, and Toyota is providing $1.4 million. The station right now is for 700 bar fueling. It's for the prototype truck that Toyota will be demonstrating, and also for the Mirage vehicles that will be coming at the port. The 350 bar will allow fueling of other types of vehicles, especially the ones that we are funding through our programs at the port. So we are proposing to add $1.2 million from our Clean Fuels Fund to have the capability of fueling both at 700 bar and 350 bar.
Any questions for Fred?
I do a couple. In the staff report, I seem to recall something about 400 kilograms. Is there a separate 400
No,
kilograms?
it's gonna come up to 400 kilogram, and then after that, it's gonna increase up to 1,000 kilogram a day.
Okay, and so, and what's gonna create the difference between the 400 and the 1,000?
It's just a startup to see how it works and all that, and ramp it up.
Okay, and is there enough of that capacity spoken for now?
We believe there will be with the vehicles coming at the port for going to the dealerships for transport from the port to the Mirage, from the port to the dealership. And then the vehicles that we are funding from the CEC grants, we received the fuel cell trucks that we are funding through the ZEC program. And also for the future, we believe there's a definite need for that. You need the infrastructure to encourage people to come with the vehicles to operate that.
And last question, is that station gonna be, open to public light duty vehicles?
Yes, well, it is intended for, right now for the heavy duty vehicles, but yes, it's gonna be at the property line of Toyota, and our participation is contingent upon being open to public with the other trucks that are operating there.
Okay, and will that be the case for the temporary fueler also?
Yes.
Okay, and when's that coming up?
I have to get back to you. on
Okay.
that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Just a short question. What is the source of the biogas that will be utilized, and how is it being transported? Is that coming in by pipeline or truck or?
Yeah, there's
Oh.
a separate project nearby by Trigen for producing hydrogen from natural gas. This is basically renewable fuel as it's calculated on paper. So biogas is injected for the production, and natural gas is used at the nearby facility on a separate project that has been funded for the generation of hydrogen from natural gas.
Okay, any chance there could be interruption of the supply of unavailability of biogas, for example?
No, it's the natural gas from the pipeline that is continuously available. The renewable part is a calculation on how much is renewable is injected in the system and how much you are extracting. So there's not going to be a what you call interruption of natural gas supply, whereas there may be some interruption in the biogas injection. There may be, we don't think so.
But that wouldn't impact
Yeah.
the hydrogen production.
Exactly.
It would just have to be accounted
Yeah.
for at the end when you have the biogas amounts that are already dedicated.
I think Fred, you have the next item.
Yes, the next item is for funding we have been allocated by ARB as part of the 2017 Budget Act. This is for funding for agricultural equipment that is named as Farmer by ARB. It's a total of $135 million. We are allocated $1.9 million. So we would like to recognize these funds here at SCAQMD, and also, use it for agricultural equipment, agricultural equipment repower and purchase replacement. We will add these funds to our current car mower program that the solicitation is open, and come back to the board when we are ready to make awards.
Thanks, Fred. Any questions for Fred on this item?
At the retreat, they mentioned that they're going to be trying, and, I mean, it seemed, based on the vast amount, that most of it is going to the Central Valley, that there was going to be an effort by staff to maybe remind them that we do have agriculture still here in the Air Basin.
Yeah, the farmer funds were argued by San Joaquin and the local ag industry up in San Joaquin for the creation for the bulk of that funding. But in large part, they argued it was based on an inventory that was done. Fred, who did the original inventory? It wasn't UC Merced, but it was.
It was UC Fresno, and we haven't seen the results, but there were a lot of farmers, especially from our area, Coachella Valley, that did not respond. So we have requested that if next year this funding is available, there will be more substantial survey of the agricultural industry, because last year we received $28 million request for agricultural equipment repower and replacement. And we expect that this year we will also have a large amount, because we held a workshop with the help of the Farm Bureau at Coachella Valley, and there's a large interest for requesting funding.
Is it a fair statement that most of the agricultural activity is not in the SCAB, but probably is in the Coachella Valley?
In Coachella Valley.
So the next item, Jason Lowe is not in the office today, but this is basically to set up the mechanisms for the fence line refinery monitoring that's required under Rule 1180. So we're setting up a special revenue fund, recognizing. Oh, Andrea's here. I'm so sorry. Let me turn it over to you. This is your.
Was great.
Okay, so do we have any questions? I'm so sorry. You were sitting kind of like behind Lottie, and I didn't see
Just
you.
one quick question, is, does this funding, or is this, does Rule 1180, how does it interact, or does it help satisfy some of the requirements of the AB 617 and, you know, the monitoring, and is there some kind of an overlap, or what's the relationship?
So there is some overlap, and obviously any data that we collect will be considering that as we look at the overall 617, but I think we're taking a holistic perspective in terms of the entire basin. And so where we can get the additional granularity around those refineries, that's what this will provide us. I don't know, Andrea, if you want to add a little bit more to that?
Yeah, I mean, these 10 community sites are specifically be set up, downwind or very close to the major refineries. And so, all of the air monitoring equipment that will be deployed at each site will be specifically, selected based on the potential emission from those specific refineries. But I mean, as you said, and as Wayne commented, there's some potential for, some overlap with all of the other AB670 related activities.
Yeah.
Potentially, but it's not, we're sure yet.
And I would say when you look at the refinery placement, right, Wilmington, in that area, we have a lot of disadvantaged communities. We're gonna have a lot of good information. That's why I say there's gonna be overlap. We're gonna look at all of it. That's gonna be one component. I think that'll help us. But obviously, there's a lot of other areas that won't be covered by this. So,
And as part of AB 617, we also build a mobile vehicle that will be able to basically take measurements, the communities where, that potentially might not be covered by this monitoring station.
So this will help the decline towards the whole holistic of 617.
yes.
Correct.
Have the district staff thought about if this monitoring will be more on the real-time side or on the integrated sample collection side? With routine measurements or with sensors that the South Coast is doing the community?
I'm gonna do the very brief answer and then let Andrea give the detailed answer.
Sure.
Yes. Andrea, you gotta do the rest.
Yes is correct. And so for the most part, real time, and, at least at the stations. For sure.
That's great.
And we're pushing on the real-time aspect.
So I think so it sounds like you guys gonna set up stations, like permanent stations, that doing routine measurements, like the full spectrum of monitoring for those programs. That's awesome.
It'll be a combination.
Yeah.
Right, like Andrea was saying, we'll have some of the vans, the mobile vans that we can drive around, and then setting up the stations that will be there for a while.
That's the
Thank
ultimate
you.
goal. We are gonna be going through some growing things, but that's where we are.
That's the goal. Sounds good.
All right, I don't see any other questions, so the next item is John's.
Okay, good morning. This item is to approve a contract to resurface the upper deck of the district's parking structure. The contractor was selected through an RFP process. They were rated the best qualified. They submitted the lowest cost proposals. So the board item is to authorize a contract with Kitson Contracting for resurfacing of the upper deck. Happy to answer any questions.
The next item is just a little cleanup. We had previously had the board recognize the $10.7 million from ARB for AB 617, and it actually is 10.8. So this is just the mechanism to officially get that other $100,000 on the way to us. Questions? All right, and then on page 5, item 9, this is kind of a routine item from the MSRC that comes to the board periodically. We usually don't have details on that, but if there are any questions, we can follow up for you afterwards. Okay, does anyone have any questions on any of the receive and file reports on the balance of page 5? Okay, I'm seeing people flipping over, so, on page 6, the remainder of those items and any of the board calendar committee type items. All right,
So
moving.
eight.
If I could
I'm
go
sorry,
back to
Sure,
item 8 on AB 617 implementation.
yes.
Do I understand that CARB will make the final selection as to which communities, disadvantaged communities, that this program is going to be implemented in?
That's correct.
And approximately how many areas will be selected statewide? Did I hear some concept of maybe a dozen or so only statewide, or did I misunderstand that from one of the other meetings?
What we've heard in general is 10, but I wouldn't, yeah. A dozen certainly within that realm, but this first year, we're not hearing much more than that because there's so much to learn in terms of everything that has to be deployed, all the outreach, all of the coordination. I think it'd be very hard pressed to do more than that for sure.
So AQMD might be lucky to get maybe 2 or 3 or 4 at the most, it sounds like.
I think that's a good estimate.
We'll be taking our recommendations for prioritization to the board, and then that gets forwarded to ARB. And the ARB board will consider that and any public input in terms of how many communities and which ones to select.
What's the timeline?
We'll be doing that in July.
July, we're going to the board in July for that. And ARB will be making their determinations at their late September board meeting, because the legislation calls for that by October 1st.
And that's why they're coordinating the 617. I got the email about the 617 meetings that you're holding in December.
Yes. Yeah, we have 5 additional community meetings. We had 5 previously throughout the basin to talk about how you would come up with criteria for identifying communities, and we had some self-nominations, talked about that at the board retreat. And then the next step, staff has been going through, looking at a lot of data and input and trying to come up with a prioritized list, so we don't have it yet, but it'll come in July.
Has there been any other clarity, or as far as when they talk about the word community, I mean, the definition of community, you know, is it strictly geopolitical, or they're looking maybe at socioeconomic or ethnic, or, because, you know, that will cross city boundaries or
Yes.
county? Well, I
All of the above.
I don't know if there's any more clarity as far as there's no, okay.
It's not defined, so I think that'll be
If he
part of
says
the
no.
process. Yeah.
Yes, they're considering all, but there hasn't been any real specifics as of yet. I don't think you'll see that kind of specificity until right before they announce it.
Just when they start talking about grant funding and things, if it's not geopolitical, the administration of, you know, what multiple jurisdictions it might, you know, a community might take in multiple jurisdictions, I think, and managing those kind of granting things would be a challenge.
Yeah, the technical assistant grants are gonna be distributed fairly soon. And so we've actually had some discussions with ARB, just in terms of all the districts are reaching out to a lot of the groups. And what we wanna be smart about is that we're not all reaching out to the same groups and paying them all the same, to do the same. So we're trying to make sure that they understand what we're doing, the groups that we're working with, what their tasks are, so to speak. And some of the funding from ARB will be used for their own capacity building. So building up the ability to recruit more within these community groups, to do more of the outreach. And then frankly, a lot of the things that we hear are being able to better explain to the community, so, you know, true technical assistance, as well as capacity building.
Ron, you have a question?
What's your notification process for these community meetings? Are we doing announcements in newspapers, or we have a mailing list that we're going to?
Yes. All of the above.
Yeah.
We do have mailing lists. We do outreach through a number of the community organizations themselves. We do posting on our website. So we reach out to some of the cities as well. So it is an all of the above approach.
I just have a question about the meetings that are upcoming. I've been to several of the past ones. Are these meetings the upcoming ones any different, or they're pretty much the same type of meeting in terms of goals?
Well, the goal is to get community participation.
Right.
And so that is constant. And I think what we've been really trying to do is understand what's the best way to do that. Because we can go up there and we can be the talking heads and try to solicit feedback. And I think we found that that's really not the most effective way. And I know the round table, I'm trying to see if there's anybody here from Public Affairs. I see Sam and Philip.
I have not attended that. Do anybody on staff know if we're planning the same format with the focus group roundtable sort of?
Yeah, I think they are planning the roundtables because they're seeking, additional staff.
Okay, so it will be similar format where we'll have a brief presentation and then we'll break people out into little groups with whiteboards and have a discussion of a couple of key questions that'll help get to how do you prioritize. Last time it was more the identification, this will be the prioritization. People seem to like that format.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was at one of the early ones, and, it was the talking head format, and there were a lot of complaints, and then when I went to another one, you folks had just really turned things around, and it got really a positive response, so, kudos to staff on that.
It's a learning experience, and I appreciate your comment, Mark. But what we're trying to do is really get that participation as opposed to providing an opportunity for people to come in and complain and to basically use it as their own platform for their own purposes. And what we've really found is that the roundtable, when we have district staff at each of the roundtables and there, it's a much more positive experience all around. So we really like that format.
We still give people the opportunity afterwards to come talk to staff if they have some other topic, but this really helps keep focus on what the meeting is about, and you don't get somebody grandstanding as much. You still get a little bit of that, but we manage it a little better in the smaller groups.
So what kind of turnout are you having?
The previous ones, they varied. Some of them, like out in Riverside and San Bernardino, they were smaller crowds, or maybe 20 or so, 20, 25. But some of the other ones, we had 100, 120, 150 people, so it varies a lot. So we'll see. Okay, anything else then on this? Thank you. All right, next, there's going to be a staff presentation to celebrate our wonderful success in the permit stuff. So, Rocky, you want to say a few words about that?
Sure. So you may recall it was October 2016 that we went before our board with our action plan to eliminate the backlog, which was approximately 50% of our permit application inventory. So we had given ourselves a 2-year horizon. I'm happy to share the news with you and with the rest of the board that just last week we crossed that 50% reduction line for the first time, ahead of schedule, under budget, and we are having the lowest inventory that we have had in the last 30 years. So I want to share these good news with the board. There are a number of things that we are doing. We are developing some nifty online permit processing tools to accelerate, to speed up the permit processing. And what would typically take several weeks to months to process, now we are distilling it down to 45 minutes. So if you are, we have one tool with the dry cleaners that it's already online and literally takes 45 minutes to complete. And we have a couple of other modules that will be going online, namely for automotive spray booths and the gas stations. And we expect those to go live within weeks, if not days. So we are very excited about it and want to share the good news with the board.
I know the board was very interested in spreading that good news. So there's a draft press release, I think, that might be on my desk already.
There is. We presented the good news at the Station Search Committee, and some of our board members said, hey, we gotta go out and celebrate, and announce, the good news. So we did put together a press release
I just got back, so I
Just
haven't
got
seen it.
back, Jill and I, our eyes have seen, and shortly you'll see me too.
Great.
Sam's back there going, better check on it.
And it'll be on the website.
There's gonna be on the website, there's gonna be a banner, that basically announces that, we slashed the inventory by 50% and we are at historic lows. Yeah,
Almost gonna make that the main focal point for their conference in November, wherever it is, or September.
which one?
Isn't there one in Rhode Island or something this fall?
Okay, it's news to Jill and I, you know, but whatever the boss says, you know, we'll go.
I was just kidding, by the way, on that last one.
Okay.
But we should get it.
But how about Hawaii? So-
We have to check on our monitors there, make sure they're
That's
operating
right.
correctly.
Is the welfare impacting us at all? The volcano,
Transport.
yeah.
The
Is
fog.
there a little bit of impact this year?
Andreas says
Might
no.
need to check.
Going
Possibly
the other way,
sulfur,
going to the.
Then this is a
sulfur
that's
may
also
float
too, right?
That's what you, yeah.
Yeah.
If there is,
Right.
we'll check it out now.
Hey, Lonzy, I
We
have a
gotta go this
question.
weekend, as a matter of fact.
With the
Yes.
switching from reclaim to command and control,
Yes.
what kind of increase do we expect in regard to permit activity?
Nobody knows the answer to that.
Well, but you get a sense.
Sure. No, it's a very good question because it's one of our variables, you know, that we have to be very cognizant of. So there are 260 facilities, okay? So at the low end, there'll be a 260 facility impact. But there are 2,400 equipment operated by those facilities. So if they tell us, you know, hey, we want to dismantle our facility permit, give us equipment-specific permits, the impact can be as high as 2,400. We are trying to pull it down towards the lower end of the range and trying to entice them to maintain their facility permit. But nobody, I mean, we can't tell, you know, how many of them, you know, may be asking for it or not.
They're really doing a good job of looking into this and seeing how we can do it more efficiently. And Lockheed's already said to his folks, we've hit the target, but we've got to go further to give ourselves a little bit of a cushion.
Thank
And
you.
there's still lots of work that the engineers can do if we ever get to the point where they don't have enough permits to process. There's lots of other things we could use those good engineering brains to do.
Well, we've
So
streamlined the easy guys coming in, but what about the more complicated one? Has there been any streamlining that will perhaps shorten the period?
There, of course, there is improvement on that front as well. Unfortunately, there are certain variables that are very difficult for us to control. For instance, when you're dealing with, say, refineries, power plants, where we work together with other agencies, with the power plants, our permitting system is intertwined with CEC's permitting system. So we have to wait for them as well. If they have to prepare, for instance, CEQA documents, if the whole thing needs to be reviewed by EPA under Title V permits, if it has to be reviewed and commented by the public, they all elongate, you know, the process. So yes, we can shrink it down up to an extent, but those permits, unfortunately, will be taking a lot longer than what smaller facilities would take.
Two things. One, fantastic job.
Thank you.
And I think that you and your staff, all of you, to take a term from Supervisor Rutherford, don't sweat the little stuff. I
Right,
think letting
right.
that go or not letting it go, but streamlining that and just having that take care of itself
Right.
is going to be very helpful. And so I wanted to ask if you had any other categories in the queue that you were going to set up for online permitting, ready to.
The answer is, the short answer?
Yes.
Which is an absolute correct answer. So just to give you, so we are going to be working in converting all our forms to electronic forms, and our goal is, even if we cannot develop online permit processing tools, to at least migrate from paper application form to an all-electronic submittal, move to the 21st century. We are working on developing forms for boilers, oil wells, negative air machines. I'm trying to remember it by heart, and another one. So the short answer is yes, and we are very encouraged with the progress that we have made so far. We have been working very closely with Ron. Ron, you were here, where are you? Okay. Ron Moskowitz, and his team. We forged a very good partnership, and we are very encouraged with the progress that we have made so far. We've been working very closely with our friends in the Bay Area, and what took them almost 10 years to develop, actually we developed in a year and a half. But we don't want to stop where we are. We want to jump further ahead. So we've got a pretty long laundry list that we want to do under phase 2 and phase 3.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I just think that'll help you because some of these more difficult things that we're going through with reclaim and just how things are changing,
Right.
that's gonna require your engineer's expertise versus this is kind of do it online, make sure that everything's, I think that's gonna free up.
And we are doing a lot of legwork to figure out ways to minimize and perhaps make less labor intensive the reclaim transition to the extent we can.
Sure.
I think a big factor on that is the closer coordination between all the groups.
Right.
So that's been, I would say, one of the bigger factors in terms of the speed and the effectiveness of what we're doing.
Right, and those facilities need to figure out what they wanna do, and you're not gonna know until you start coming in.
Yes.
Matt, you had a question?
Great job.
Yeah, again, great job. That's one of the big issues to tackle, and you guys did a great job with it. So the, what was our baseline number of backlog permits again? I think it was.
So we started in June 2016, we were at 7,348. And roughly 50% of it was backlog.
And when, before you started, it was over 8,000,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
Because we started making improvements right away,
Right.
but when we officially started, it was at 7,000, but it was actually higher.
Yeah, because you guys cleared off some of the
right.
the surface dust, and then
Right.
we got it down to a lower baseline. I just want to make sure that you're getting the appropriate credit for
Yeah.
the baseline that you wanted to find out where you're getting at.
Right. I mean, one thing, we don't want to dwell on the numbers all that much, but when we say, we reached the historically lowest level ever, we broke the records, by a pretty huge margin. The lowest we have been, if you go back 30 years, it has been at 6,500 to 6,700. And last week, we hit the 3,600. I mean, we're talking about 40–50% lower. And so we are obviously very proud, of where we are, and hopefully we'll be able to go even further because as Jill and Gwen indicated, we know reclaim is coming down the pike. We need some cushion and shock absorber to account for that hit, because there'll be a hit.
Yeah. And how does the financial investment of the district compare to that of the Bay Area? Because I mean, you say that we did it like within
My gosh.
a couple of years, they took them 10 years. I mean, what's
At
the
a fraction, a small fraction, and Ron can correct me, Bay Area had spent north of 10, close to $15 million over a 10-year time frame. And frankly, we spent maybe around 1 million, about $1 million. So it's.
But can you imagine what he would have done with 10 more million? It would have been unbelievable.
Yeah.
Boy, we need more money.
So I don't know how that goes with our friendly agencies, right? I don't want to embarrass other agencies, but anything that can be done to, promote how efficient this process has been, not only what the result has been, but promoting how it's gone about. But in a short period of time, we've done it cost effectively.
Right.
Me adding that into
I'll be in Lockheed's,
the press release.
You're raising a very good point. We really don't want to embarrass the sister agency, and in their defense, these are really difficult tools to develop, and you are bound to do many errors. So you go from multi-generational, product development efforts, and they came very close to abandoning the effort, because they just couldn't get it done. Eventually they did, but we very closely work with them, and we learn from their
You
errors. So
benefit.
that's how, yeah, exactly, we benefit.
And that's a positive that you can
Yeah.
say, is
So-
that the 2A, you benefited from sharing that
Absolutely.
information.
And they share, the goods and the bads,
Yeah.
that effort, and, yeah,
They didn't make you recreate the wheel.
absolutely, yeah,
And
yeah.
we're doing
yeah.
the same, we're sharing it with
Yeah.
CAPCOA members, and we're talking to them not just about the IT part, but also the things that Lockie and Amir did with their leadership in terms of changing the culture and making the engineers more aware of what the backlog was and how important the permits are to businesses, and getting all the staff engaged in what are your ideas for what are we doing that we could do better. So it's hard things like the coding, it's, setting the goals and keeping people accountable, and then it's a lot of the leadership that, they just really have done a phenomenal job.
There'll be a lot of transparency. We are developing a tool, it's a dashboard tool, where you as an applicant, or you as a public JOQ, you wanna know where a particular permit application is, you will be able to go in and see where the application is in the process, whether it's moving forward or if it got stuck. If it got stuck, why it got stuck, are we waiting for information from the applicant, or is it on us? You will be able to see this, and that again will improve the transparency issue and accountability aspect, tremendously, both internally as well as externally. And that tool will have an internal prototype early summer, and hopefully a public prototype by the tail end of summer, maybe early fall. We are very excited about it. Ron?
This must have a positive impact on staff working on permits. Correct? I mean,
Yes.
So,
Morale
are
is
there gonna be some
much
people who say, well, what the
Yes.
hell am I doing? Are we gonna shift those people somewhere else? I
still have a lot to do.
There is a lot of work to do. There is a lot of work to do, and in fact, our to-do list is a lot longer than what we can actually do. But we are deliberately keeping the list long. We want people not to stay,
And on the other hand, with these reclaim permits coming in, which are difficult, do
Yes.
you envision a desire or a need to actually increase engineers? Or
Not in the short run. We will, we'll try to keep, we'll
about the
try
long
to
run?
accomplish the job with what we have at hand, okay?
We
What
need
what
pretty
is
much,
gonna hurt us a little bit, the reclaim transition is, remember we had said we wanna migrate to an all electronic submittal? We may have to slow down that conversion to address the reclaim transition first. I mean, if there's any negative aspect, of the reclaim transition internally, that's basically what it is. But we are not abandoning that goal. It's just that it may take a little bit longer to do, but we'll get there. And we're trying to do it, with whoever we have at hand, and not necessarily have to hire additional people.
My short answer would be no.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one more item on the, I'm sorry, one more question, go
Yeah.
ahead. One more question?
Just, first of all, congratulations, and I know it's a team effort. I mean,
It is.
And,
Truly.
even outside your area, so the rest of the executive council and all the other folks here, so, just a great job. At Stationary Source Committee, it was mentioned that one of the areas that really made things go a lot faster was, for the most part, changing in policies.
Yes.
And eliminating some barriers. Can the public feel like those changes in policies are not going to have any sort of impact on either the quality of permits, the stringency of permits, or anything else related to those permits? Because there's not a lot of transparency
Yes.
necessarily
Yes.
on those things that would have gotten changed.
110% yes. That should be the one and only expectation. When we set out to implement our action plan, in fact, when we designed it, one of the primary principles that we designed the plan around was, yes, we'll improve our efficiency, yes, we'll be working harder, faster, but not at the expense of the environment. We are not gonna take any shortcuts.
We're South
to the
Coast
environment.
HQMD, we're not EPA.
And I gotta knock on wood, even though we are pushing very hard, things are moving a lot faster out of the door. I have not gotten a call yet of any complaints saying, hey, how did you let this thing get out, through the cracks? Gotta knock on wood, and of course, as I'm saying that, probably the phone will be ringing this afternoon.
Don't say yes.
Yeah. But the short answer is 110%, no compromise on the environmental protection, or bending rules that way.
Okay, it's not the speed I was concerned about. It's the policy changes.
Yes.
And I know that the district has already learned during one period in its lifetime that the speed of getting things out sometimes can hurt permits, and I know
Yes.
that was a lesson that a lot of people still remember.
Right. And things happen in the past. I mean, there were past backlog reduction efforts,
Right.
and in the past, if you go back 10 years ago with that effort, we had hired a lot of external engineers, temporary engineers, to help us out. And one lesson that we learned out of that experience was, well, even though those people were working hard, there were quite a few errors committed, in processing permits. This is why, as part of this effort, we strictly rely on our internal engineers and we work in improving and getting rid of roadblocks, and bottlenecks. And we didn't have to rely on external engineers at all. And we managed to minimize these kind of errors tremendously.
Can you say something about the policy changes that were made that resulted in?
Well, there's not one, there are multiple ones that we are working on actually. One thing that has been helping us is we try to collapse. We have a two-step permitting process where we issue first a permit to construct.
Right.
Once the equipment gets constructed, source tested, and that information gets submitted to us, we issue, and reviewed by us, we issue a permit to operate. We are keeping this two-step process with the complex processes like the refineries, power plants, and what have you, But with the simpler processes, the cookie-cutter types, we are collapsing those into two. And rather than going through the two-step process, go with the one-step process. So that's something that we have been experimenting with that has helped us quite a bit. We are trying to streamline our public notification process. We have not formalized the policy yet, but we are trying. We have no de minimis level in the public policy, in the public notification policy or rule at this juncture. So we are trying to see whether some de minimis level will make sense so that we don't have to go through the process for inconsequential permit applications. But we have not finalized this that policy internally yet. But it's going to be a constant iterative process that we are going to be working on because there's a long laundry list of policies that need to be updated.
And in terms of that latter policy change that you're working on internally, are you going to be getting and seeking input from the public on those changes?
No.
Why not? I mean, if you're going to be impacting their ability to give comment and making a change like that, that seems to me to be.
Well, if it was an impact on the ability to provide comment, then yes, we would. Most of these policy changes are just internal policies.
Yeah.
They're our own standard operating policies. But anything that affected the public, we would certainly do notice and get their input and do more. But the internal policies, those are going to remain internal policies.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood.
But we are going to place them in the public domain. So the public will have the opportunity to review them. So it's not that we are going to be altering policies and we'll be doing things in the dark, you know. So we made a commitment, whatever policies we develop, we'll put them on the web. It's just that we're not taking them through, just like we do, you know, with the rulemaking process where we have workshops, comments, feedback, you know.
Okay, thank you.
That was a lot. Okay, so there's one other item on page 7 for other business. We're adding a request for the board to approve releasing an RFP so we can get some help with the annual community Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service Forum and the Cesar Chavez Day of Remembrance. So that's under other business for the board.
How much money are we talking about here?
I
Well-
don't recall, actually.
So what we're trying to do under that is do a multi-year contract, because what we've been doing is a 1 year, and the contractors have said that they're hard pressed to get venues, they can't lock them up in advance. So this will be a 3-year, right now I think we're in the process of asking for information from vendors, Philip.
Right, I mean, the contract amount and the contemplated basically for the 2 events is not to exceed $150,000. That'd be for the 1 year with options of 2-year extensions, 2 1-year extensions, out of our normal process.
So this doesn't go on to admin or anything, this is just coming straight to the
There's a
board?
special admin committee meeting this Friday.
Okay, and then we're going to invite the folks that participated in the Bike to Work Day to come down to the beginning of the board meeting as the board requested. So you'll see some folks in their colorful uniforms.
In their bikers.
Hopefully not the biker shorts, but the colorful shirts. And we'll recognize them through the board of opportunities. Thank you for that. Is there anything else then? All right, thank you all very much.
Okay, you mentioned a special meeting of the admin committee tomorrow, is it?
Yes.
Tomorrow at 4:30.
Yeah, and what is the purpose of that one?
To discuss this RFP for the scheduling of, to hire a contractor for the Martin Luther King and Cesar Chavez events.
Okay.
And instead of doing it on a year-to-year basis, do a multi-year basis.
Yeah, I did get that, too. Okay, I've got a couple general questions, if I may.
Sure.
Both come from the LA Times stories. There's a recent story here on,
BYD. Oh,
Excuse me?
sorry. BYD.
well, that one second, but first, appointment of a regional EPA director up in San Francisco.
Mike Stoker.
Yeah, took away 2 or 3 things from that article. First of all, they didn't seem to believe in human causes of global warming. Secondly, he wants to work from San Francisco. Third, his qualifications seemed rather slim, to say the least.
I think he doesn't want to work from San Francisco.
Excuse me, he wants to work from Santa Barbara, yeah.
Santa Barbara.
Okay,
Well, he's a
So-
local guy then.
so regarding that topic, my question is, do you have any updated information about whether he will be, quote, allowed to do that? And by the way, does the regional EPA administrator require confirmation by the Senate?
It doesn't require Senate confirmation.
Yeah.
It's straight from the president,
Okay,
from OPA.
so no update on information about that other than what we've read in the press so far?
So his duty station is San Francisco.
Right.
Whether or not he's in San Francisco the majority of his time, I think that still remains to be seen. So the IG report that was probably referenced basically said that EPA, so I'll back up. So 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, 5 years after I left the agency, the IG said when they were reviewing travel that the former Region 9 administrator, traveled a lot between San Francisco and Los Angeles. And they said that there was like $66,000 in travel costs that was basically for me to go home on the weekends. But what they didn't say was that, you know, all my travel had been approved, all my travel had been audited, and that all of the travel that I had done did have documentation. So I didn't just come down here and go home. And I take that back because there were occasions where that's exactly what I did. But I paid for all of those out of my pocket. And so the article didn't mention that. So in the latest article where it just said, and I think it was the one where Senator Feinstein said, you know, there were issues that were raised before where better documentation was required, was fine. You can easily document that. But to think that the regional administrator of one of the largest geographic regions shouldn't focus on Los Angeles when you have the worst air quality in the nation, you have the highest industrial concentration of the entire region, you have a high number of Superfund sites, you have a high number of tribal issues, you have a whole host of congressional representatives that demand the regional administrator's time, that it's ludicrous to not expect the regional administrator to be in the Los Angeles office. Now, having said that, there's no way that you can be a regional administrator and only stay in the Los Angeles office. You have to be at the duty station. And so just in my experience, the first 2 years when I was at the agency, I was literally there Sunday night and I didn't leave till Friday night. And I paid out of my own pocket for 2 years for all that travel. And it wasn't until we opened the LA office, I want to say 2003, that staff said, well, you don't have to, you can use the LA office, and as long as we're justifying it and you're meeting with groups and individuals, that's fine. So I fully expect Mike Stoker, from what I understand, his original contention was he wanted a duty station assigned to Los Angeles. But everybody said you can't manage 900 people from Los Angeles. It doesn't work. So his duty station is still San Francisco. That's where he's going to be. I don't know what they're going to do as far as his time, but I'm actually scheduled to meet with him tomorrow and talk to him about what it means to be a regional administrator, at least from my perspective. So, and then he'll ask questions about the district and what are the challenges that we face, where can they help. To be honest, I just don't know if this administration will be able to do the things that we want.
Yeah.
You know, we talked, I was at a NACA meeting this past week, and we had Bill Wareham, we had a lot of EPA officials there. And, you know, they talk about cooperative federalism, except for California.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, we talked about, for instance, the non-compliance rate on mobile sources and the need for the feds to step up. We talked about the fact that mobile sources make up 88% of our NOx issues. The feds need to step up. And I'm just not sure that this administration is going to do it unless we put so much pressure from so many other groups. So we're looking at, in essence, a campaign to get a lot of the national groups going to get all these different congressional pressure from the key appropriators. So we're going to be doing everything we can to move it. Whether it works, I don't know. I think at the very least what it does is it sets up for a new administration to come in and already have these things in motion to take immediate action. But if there's a chance that we can get a lot of the economic arguments, one of the things that we're also doing is a socioeconomic study on the national benefits. And so what I tried to do this past week was get some of the red states, Indiana, Ohio, and others to sort of step up and talk about the fact that if the federal government does the heavy-duty truck roll, it's going to help those states that are either marginal or have O&M plans to maintain or to move into attainment, and to do so in a much more cost-effective way than if they had to do stationary source controls. And they get that idea. It's just a question of whether or not their governors will allow them to sort of step out and say that that's necessary. But we're making a hardcore press on all of that. The Northeast states are also very interested in sort of working with us on that. So there's an opportunity. I just don't know how or when this administration might take it.
Well, good luck with your meeting
Thanks.
tomorrow. Secondly, regarding the story about BYD that appeared in the LA Times on Sunday, I guess it was, quite a long investigative article that brought out facts going back for 2, 3, 4, 5 years almost, and maybe Sam Atwood can comment on any indications that there might be any follow-up articles. Oftentimes when the LA Times does an articles, we know they have follow-up articles. Secondly, wonder what your reaction to the article is in general, and most particularly as regards this agency. Does AQMD have contracts, grants, and so on that involve BYD and the buses and so on, and what actions would AQMD be taking regarding those contracts?
I'll let Sam speak to the issue of, has there been any follow-up from the Times on that issue?
No,
Or
there has not been any follow-up this week. The Times does have an open public records request for all of our correspondences with BYD going back to 2017.
Well, when you say it open, they can only request, they can't do a prospective request, so
It
that's
is
what.
pending, would be probably a more accurate word. It's requests that we are still working to produce documents for. But generally speaking, a lot of requests do not result in follow-up stories.
Could you
No
maybe
indication.
clarify what the LA Times said? We've got a great newspaper in Orange County, and some of us don't necessarily read the Times.
Oh, you ought to in this case.
Well, the LA Times article in a nutshell was critical of the BYD product, saying that they had limited range, they had a number of defects, that they got a lot of no-bid contracts, and that even today there's still a number of problems. But I guess to that, and I'll ask Fred to pitch in, but whenever you're deploying a new technology, there's going to be challenges, and that's why we do a lot of these evaluations, right? We don't just buy in mass and then deploy them. You have to look at the duty cycle, and there were criticisms that I think they were saying that on a 100-mile range, they were only getting anywhere from 48 to 70 miles, that there were fires that were caused, and BYD said it was because of the bus drivers riding heavily on the brakes. So there were a lot of things that, from my perspective, as I was reading it, I was thinking, this is just a technology proving phase. You're always going to have bugs. You're always going to work these things out. I don't know, Fred.
Yeah, that's exactly true, and we are involved in a project, a grant that we won from CEC for development of heavy-duty zero-emission trucks. We submitted that proposal together with Bay Area and San Joaquin AQMD for a number of trucks to be deployed, demonstrated, and that's exactly the things we're going to do, basically see their performance, their range, any kind of bugs that needs to be, problems need to be resolved. To date, we haven't paid anything on a product that has been on the road, or so we are at the development stage and deployment stage. So that's exactly where the company is, especially our purpose with having the zero-emission freight trucks. They are definitely a player in that. They have a location here in Lancaster, and we are working closely with them. As problems come up, we are working with them to resolve, but we haven't seen anything that we have been basically said otherwise, and we have paid for, and then the performance have been different than we have talked about.
And Mark, I would add that, so I met Stella Lee last Friday at the CCA luncheon, and asked her if she could arrange a tour for us. So I know a lot of our staff have been there, but I've never seen their facilities. And so what we want to do is ask some of the board members if they'd like to go to help tour this facility, just to sort of see firsthand what it's all about. But I think that, again, I wasn't too concerned because a lot of it is in the proving stage. And, if we're going to make investments, what better place to make investments than within, our state? Obviously, I'd like to make those investments within our region if we could. And I think it's just a normal phase you go through in any kind of tech deployment.
Well, a couple things struck me about that article. There weren't very many positive things to say about these electric buses. There were innumerable negative things said from numerous public agencies across the country, whether it be locally or Albuquerque or whatever. Secondly, I think it said in there, I'd have to look again, but I think there was, someone was quoted as saying, well, for about a tenth of the cost, maybe my fractions are off here, for less cost, you could get, I guess you'd call ultra-low emission diesel engines at much less cost that would have extremely low emissions in terms of diesel. And so the question obviously is raised is heavy investment in electric buses at this point in time until they're better proven, given their very expensive price tag, a wise investment until they're improved as compared to ultra low emission diesel trucks. So that's kind of a general question, I guess.
So, and it's a really tough question. And the reason I say that it's a tough question is because you have to sort of look at it both from the immediate and from the long term. So from the immediate aspect, completely agree with you. That if we want to get NOx reductions, which we have to get to meet our SIP obligation and get into attainment, we should be putting money where we get the greatest NOx reductions, period. And that means the 0.02 gram natural gas engine or these ultra-low diesel engines. That'll help us get there, right? But by the same token, we want to ultimately get to zero emission technology. And so what you have right now is that you have at the state level a policy that is basically saying we want zero emission technology and we're going to make the investments right now. And what we're saying is, but we don't want to forego those opportunities. So you have a clash, if you will, between ARB, who's really promoting zero emission as much as possible. And the example that I'll give are the VW settlement funds. And this is something that Fred and I were dealing with just this very morning with regards to Mayor Mitchell and what she's going to say at the ARB board meeting tomorrow with regards to how those funds are being spent. Our position is exactly what you said. We should not be foregoing NOx emission reductions right now that we can get with natural gas engines and with other technology. And so the state looks at it from Fred, I want to say how much? 300 and some odd million?
Yes, about $350 million, $360 million, the VW settlement.
And of that 360 million, 60 million is what they were saying, right?
60 million is for near zero emission trucks. Those are the 0.02 gram.
Yeah.
And then they have proposed $130 million for zero emission school buses and shuttle buses, and another $90 million for zero emission heavy duty trucks and freight.
So you can see there's a big investment, and that's really the policy that's being driven by ARB. And so, you know, hopefully other board members will say, we need to strike a balance. It can't be so heavily invested in zero technology that we're not going to meet our SIP obligations. And, you know, even at the national level, Bill Warren had talked about, when we talk about the low compliance rate on mobile sources and all these other issues, he said, I think the money should go into getting the reductions and not driving technology. And to a certain extent, we agree with that. But it has to be both. And that balance, I think, is the issue that we're trying to grapple with ARB and trying to get them to understand that, you know, there are real ramifications for us not doing it. And then whether it's school buses or whether it's drayage buses or others, the school buses, while they sound great and everybody loves to have those clean buses, there have only been 2 electric school buses delivered in the state of California. And so we don't really know all the things that we were talking about, the durability, the reliability, charging, and then given the limited time that they run, we're really not going to get the maximum NOx benefit on school buses. But who wants to say that we're not going to give these buses for our kids, right? But if you're looking at it from a broader perspective, we would be better off putting that money somewhere else. So it's that balance.
So I want to follow up. I think, there is an angle, because the bus itself, the emission, if you're turning into a zero, it's still, when the kids on the bus, they're still breathing in whatever is on the roadway. So cleaning up those heavy emitters is beneficial,
Yeah.
right? It's a balance point. I think you're right on, it's really a balance.
Well, of course, zero emission sounds good in the abstract, but of course, we all know that the power has to come from somewhere.
That's a tailpipe.
And we can talk about, okay, we're gonna move the renewables, but in the next decade or 2 or 3, a lot of that power is still gonna come from natural gas plants. And
Well, there was a really good argument made yesterday at the NACA meeting, and it had to do with investments in the infrastructure. And when you look at the investment in the natural gas infrastructure, your emissions are constant. But if you look at the investment in your energy and your energy infrastructure, as that energy infrastructure gets cleaner, your emissions get cleaner. So do you want to, because you're putting in more renewable solar,
Sure.
hydro, all of these other issues, wind. So as your grid becomes cleaner, your overall emissions become cleaner. So again, it goes back to that balance, right? Because we know we could get those immediate investments, but they're gonna be steady. But we're gonna get them a lot sooner, right? And so that's the main thing that we want. But we don't want to create an infrastructure where we're gonna have this huge stranded asset for many years to come, then becomes the argument for why we don't go to the next phase.
Yeah, I'm wondering, usually the planning phase is 3 years. I'm wondering for things like this, is there any long-term projections? So that would take more than 3 years to fully appreciate the benefits and the long-term impacts. Something might be thinking the long-term projection.
So I do think that this does bear some relationship to item number 9 that we discussed. And it at the least also falls under other business. But I do think, just to avoid getting further afield, we should probably focus on moving forward and see if there's any other thing that falls under other business.
Thank you, Council.
That's what it's here for.
Any other issues?
Thank you already.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.